Hey everybody, this is Kodak here, and that's right, Seven Deadly Sins is back, baby. It's coming back to us in the form of Errata text. It's the title I eventually decided to settle on. I called it Errata text because in gamer terms, Errata text is what happens when a card is given a sort of update to its text, an update to fix a typo or to clarify its intended effect. In my case, I'm calling it errata text because it's all the stuff I missed out in talking about in the Seven Deadly Sins series that I still want to speak on. We started with that last week with the Duel Masters video, the video about a game that is near and dear to my heart, that is the basis and inspiration for many a card game, particularly this one that's been doing the rounds lately. Like I said, it's a game that's near and dear to me, so that's why I wanted to do a whole video about it. I want to do videos where I just kind of look at card games and talk about them a bit, but I wanted to do the Duel Masters video before I got onto any of those, because there are so many things that I would talk about and reference from Duel Masters that would come up in those videos. So this is kind of, my base, my ground level game that I want to talk about. It is a game that I've referred to as How to Make a Card Game 101, because it does such a good job of simplifying concepts that you find in more complicated games like Magic the Gathering. It offers such a streamlined play experience that it's just such a good thing to work off of. In fact, this binder I keep pointing at, some people were mentioning how the opening of the video I made gave them chills when I listed off the Kaijudo code, and I betcha it's because of this binder. Because this binder, it was one that came with like a special subscription thing. A special subscription to a sort of Duel Masters fan club, the same way you have like the Lego Mania magazine club. It was similar to that. You would get sent this binder. You would also be provided with like promo cards and update newsletters and additional tabs for like the cards and stuff inside. You got like this super blown up artwork in there. But the thing that about this binder is the back. Yep, does that look familiar? So what I did was I took this and I basically recreated it at the start of the video. I used the same image, the same font, the same spacing. It's the Kaijudo code. So if you got chills from watching that, it's probably because you owned or saw this binder. I thought it was such a cool idea. It's just a bunch of rules about good sportsmanship, good fair play, good sportsmanship, how to basically act in a gaming environment. I mean, they didn't forget they did forget the terms I will not touch somebody else's property without permission, and I will not place my Coke can on the same table as a game is going on. Those are a couple of things in the Kaijudo code I think they forgot. But yeah, I'm going to be talking about things that don't really fall under sins, but are still things that need a lot of consideration, things that are frequently taken for granted, things like card rarity, things like how a booster pack is put together, the role of like art, the taxonomy of card game players, things that other folks have talked about, but I just kind of want to poke and prod at a bit more to really get some analysis done. Although, of course, with the territory of the errata text, I am going to be taking on more sponsors for these videos. I'm going to vet my sponsors more carefully. I know the first sponsor I did for Seven Deadly Sins didn't really work out. Those guys still owe me $150, but I'm going to vet them more carefully, and I'm only going to be showing off products that, I use or believe in. You're not going to see me like a lot of people are like pushing ads for these flat wallets. You're not going to see me doing those because I like to slip a set of spare keys into my wallet, and those flat wallets just can't handle that. So you're not going to see an ad like that. It's got to be something that it's got to be like a cool new game coming out, or like a product that I would actually use. I have a couple sponsors lined up already. I deliberately did not do one for the Duel Masters video because this is, like I said, it's a subject that's very near and dear to my heart. This is the game that definitely solidified my interest in the design aspects of card games, not just, the cool collectability and play aspects. I am also going to try to focus on things that aren't necessarily tied to gameplay. That's another thing with the Seven Deadly Sins. Only like 2 of them are related to actual gameplay mechanics, and the things I discuss are the side effects of those mechanics, like how they might devalue a card or make a game a bit more difficult to sell or maintain. Not really like, oh, these mechanics are bad or something like that. Like, I'm going to try to come up with the stuff that I can, do more concrete details on. I'm going to leave the creativity up to the game designers. At least that's my stated goal here. We'll see what else happens here. Like I don't know if I'll be able to do a video about like developing cards for balance, because that's so frequently a case-by-case thing that I can't necessarily, make the rules about that. Like if for an example of balance being sort of an iffy thing, if your game includes a card that allows you to draw 2 cards, how strong that card is depends on how the rest of your game is built. In a game like Pokemon, where there are also cards that let you draw 5, 6, 7 cards, a card that lets you draw 2 cards is not going to be that strong. But in a game like Yu-Gi-Oh!, where card advantage is, a huge factor in how successful your game is going to be, and just being able to drop 1 card to draw 2 more can give you a tremendous advantage, that card can be really powerful. So it depends on the game you've made when it comes to talking about, things like card balance and stuff like that. So I'm probably going to stray away from those kinds of subjects. I do, of course, plan on doing more videos about card games, about important card games. I don't know if I'll talk too much about, like Pokemon, Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh! Those have kind of been done to death. There are entire channels that talk about the histories of those games. I don't know if I could really say too much on those that hasn't already been said. Although, going back to Duel Masters, one thing that people did ask me about was, instant speed. It's like, oh, is instant speed in the stack really that complicated? It depends, but there are definitely cases where it can be made a lot more confusing than it really needs to be. Instant speed is the concept where you can play a card at any time, including in response to whenever an opponent makes a move. And that can create a bit of a nightmare. It's something that players can have a hard time wrapping their heads around, especially if you have cards like Faceless Butcher. Now, I specifically put up Faceless Butcher and ran out of my breath when talking about it, because it is one of those cards that instant speed and the stack turn really confusing. So, Faceless Butcher's effect is when it comes into play, you can remove a creature from play except Faceless Butcher. And when Faceless Butcher leaves play, that card comes back. So it's basically like a slasher movie villain in that it kidnaps a creature until it gets defeated and then it comes back into play. Seems, easy thematic, right? But then in comes the stack, bumbling in, blind drunk, yelling, no, that's not how that card works. Because according to the stack, each of those effects is a different one, so each one triggers its own stack. So if I put Faceless Butcher into play, and my opponent lets it go into play, they don't cast like Counterspell on it or something, its first effect goes off when it goes into play. So I choose a creature to get removed from play. However, because this is a triggered ability, that creates a stack that can be responded to. If I were to then play the card Rescind on the Faceless Butcher card as part of a stack, I would say in response to the activation of Faceless Butcher's effect, I am going to cast Rescind on it. Rescind allows me to return a permanent to its owner's hand, so I would then return the Faceless Butcher to my hand. Now, since it has left the field and is now back in my hand, that triggers its second effect, which gets put onto the stack. So what happens is, Faceless Butcher enters the field, its first effect goes off, I play Rescind in response to that first effect, Faceless Butcher returns to my hand, its second ability gets added to the stack on top of the first ability. Now, I know some people might think, wait a minute, Faceless Butcher isn't in play anymore, doesn't its effect stop working? And that's another thing that can be kind of confusing, because a card specifically has to say that it negates an effect or counters an effect in order to stop an effect that is on the stack from going off. Anybody who plays Yu-Gi-Oh! And is familiar with the funny rulings of Mystical Space Typhoon understands my meaning. I mean, sure, I could blow up your Monster Reborn as you play it, but that does not stop the effect from going off. So both of these effects are on the stack, but the second ability, because of how the stack works, it's last in, first out, the second ability resolves first, and the second ability currently has no target, so it fizzles, meaning that the first ability now goes off, and the creature targeted by the first ability is now gone forever. Thank you, Stack, for making things way more complicated than they needed to be. That's what I'm talking about when we're talking tangles created by timing and the stack, is Faceless Butcher, which is probably the most famous example of this kind of tangle. I don't know if there are other instances that operate like this, but it can get pretty hairy pretty fast. So that is why sort of nullifying some of the instant speed abilities can be important. But like I said, Duel Masters still managed to preserve the ability to mess around on your opponent's turn with the blocker and trigger mechanics, so you still will have something to do, ways to respond to your opponent's moves, that fun little counterplay. So it's a really elegant solution that they came up with on this. And the ability blocker is kind of important in Duel Masters because you can target monsters for your attack. So instead it like redirects the attack to another monster that was intended for one monster. Like if I want to knock out my opponent's monster that has some beneficial effect, but then nope, you're gonna go and fight Laura Giga instead. It's nice to have these sorts of abilities because it gives players the sensation of playing with instant speed without creating the traffic jams that things like instant speed can actually cause. And that is why I talked about it as an elegant solution. It's certainly something to consider. I mean, I'll certainly talk about game mechanics. I won't like speak in absolutes. I will talk about mechanics present in games and the effects that they can have, but I'm not going to say, oh, these mechanics are good, these mechanics are bad. I'm going to say this mechanic kind of devalues your cards and this mechanic makes it a pain to sell. I'm going to try to avoid like calling mechanics straight up bad. Like a lot of people looked at my set rotation video and were like, oh, he's going to say set rotation bad, versus the reality, which is the video is set rotation frequently misunderstood and misused. So that's kind of my goal, is to, you know, not necessarily like harp against something, but take a deep dive and look at what it works and how its effects are. That's what I did with the 7 Deadly Sins. That's what I'm going to be doing with Errata text. I hope you guys look forward to it and enjoy the ride. So until next time, this is the first follow-up for Errata text, and this is Kodak signing off.